Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome this evening to our workshop series, Workshop Wednesdays at International Dentist Central. So glad to have you guys here. And a little ritual we always like to do is just check the chat box to make sure that everyone can hear me. So I will, at International Dentist Central, so glad to have you guys. I'm going to ask you all to, if you see this and if you can hear me, just write a simple yes you can in the chat box. It'll help me know that I'm not going on and on and on without an audience here. Sometimes we have some technical issues. We've had a few weeks where we've had a couple technical issues, and it's good to check this stuff beforehand. So I will look forward to hearing from you in the chat box. Also, while you're at it, if you just want to say maybe your first name, just say hello in the chat box and where you are viewing from, what part of the country if you're in the US, or what part of the world if you're chatting in or viewing from another part of the world. That would be great. So again, still looking forward to hearing. I see there's about 20 viewers on here, so I should be starting to see some comment that you can hear me. And I am not seeing that, but anyway, maybe we'll just get started and just hope for the best. Hopefully you guys all see the chat box. Let me just double check something real quick and make sure that everyone can see this, because sometimes just have to check. Good thing is I see a lot of people watching here. Okay, great. All right, so anyway, I guess we have some shy people or people are having trouble using the chat box. What I'd like to do, though, is make sure that the chat box works. So if you do get a chance to just say who you are, that would be great. Okay, great. Oh, I guess I didn't see the chatting for some reason. Good to know. So I appreciate you guys letting me know that you can indeed see me. Thanks for that. Cool. Okay, great. And hi, Alicia from Kansas. Welcome, Ruby from Atlanta. That's great. We have someone from Spain, Izo. Welcome. And Daniela from Romania. That's awesome. Gina from Arizona. Welcome. And Kunsang from Canada. So actually, we have quite an international group tonight. So I really appreciate that. Sometimes we just have a lot of folks in the U.S., but tonight we have some folks from all over the countries, the world. So that's fantastic. All right, so let's get started then. Now that I know everyone's able to see me and hear me. My name is Kevin Marshall. As I have mentioned in the past, my focus here at IDC, besides I do wear a lot of different hats. I do take a big part of my role here is managing and overseeing a lot of the editing and application editing that we do. So some of you have started to work with us this year as you're preparing for CAPID and the various applications. And so we have a great team of editors that is super busy right now, because we're really helping a lot of folks get their applications ready, work on their statement of purpose, work on their CV, application essays, and letters of recommendation, all that stuff. So it's a big part of our role is that, and that's what I help to oversee here at IDC. The other thing that I do is a lot of interviewing and a lot of interview guidance and coaching. So some people will schedule like a coaching session with me for interviewing, and then also we have an interview mastery course and that includes a mock interview, which usually clients do with one of our interviewing specialists, one of which being Sarah Vince. Now, Sarah was supposed to make it tonight, but due to a scheduling conflict, we had to postpone that. And so we'll be hopefully having her on in the next few webinars. Hopefully we're going to be able to get her on and chat about her experience interviewing many of our clients, and as well as her background in general with interviewing, which she used to do some interviewing at university systems. And I too used to do interviewing in a university system, as I mentioned before on past workshops. And so I don't want to bore you all too much with that if you guys have been watching every week. But just quickly, having worked in having worked at a university and for in the staff, I did a lot of what we would call staff selection committees, and I would sit on a lot of committees where we would interview and hire some of the major positions in the university, as well as various seats that were open for students, as well as including even the president of the university. So got to see a lot of different aspects of interviewing, got to see what a university interview is like on both sides of the table. And I will say that interviewing at a university, whether it's for a position like an advanced standing seat, or whether it's for a job, or whether it's for professorship, no matter what it is, it's a much more strenuous interview than sometimes than you'll find at a job, like for a job interview, and also a lot longer. Usually it's a much bigger process and includes hours and hours. And so that's the unique thing about a university interview, is that you're being held to sometimes a much more strenuous standard than you would at even a job interview. Sometimes you'll notice after you graduate from dental school here in the US and then you go for a job interview, you might sit down with a potential employer and they may ask you kind of random questions off the top of their heads, get a feel for you, and if they like you, you're hired. Not uncommon at all, especially if you're going to a practice where there's a dentist that owns the practice, or a chain of practices. Even if it's a large practice, even if it's a large chain like a Western Dental or something like that, often the hiring manager has the power to just make that decision. But with university systems, there's a lot more that goes into it. A lot more people have to sign off on you as a candidate and basically say, yes, I agree, this person is the right one for us. I'm gonna adjust the light here so that doesn't keep this going in and out. So little distracting. But anyway, at a university system, there's so many checks and balances, and so many people have to have a say in this, and so the process can be months, whereas at a job it can just be a week or so. So you'll have the process at the beginning where applications are accepted and reviewed by initially like staff members, and then they kind of make their way up to various professors if they pass certain filters, and then after that, invitations are sent out, and then, all that kind of correspondence happens. And then finally you get to an interview, which includes a bench test. And, some schools like Loma Linda, they look at your bench test performance and then they interview you, or they consider you for a second interview. Whereas in most schools, after the bench test or before the bench test, usually it's after, that's when you're really evaluated by 1, 2, could be up to 5 people sometimes, depending on the program. And everyone sort of has to sign off. Everyone has to say, yeah, yay or nay, and basically rank you, evaluate you, score you. Often you won't even be accepted per se until all the calculations have been tallied, all the candidates have been processed, and then they kind of line them up by score, and whoever's above a certain score, whoever's kind of on the top of the list automatically gets in, and then they kind of have a debate and discussion as a committee about the people in the middle. And so what is your goal with interviewing? Your goal is always to try to get at the top of that list, so that you're not someone they have to debate about, because that's often when people are placed on wait lists. And I remember days where, when I worked at a university, where I'd be in these long meetings that could take all of our days. I mean, we'd be there from 8 in the morning till 5 p.m. The entire workday with a couple breaks. And our only thing that we could do that day, our only job that day, was to go through every single candidate on the question list, people who were either, who were on the fence about whether we were going to accept them or not, and decide and argue and defend and discuss, maybe 10 of us even, as we went through each application and made a decision, and then we would kind of put them on the board. It's a very intense process for the staff, for the professors, and so my hat's off to them. But I give you this background information so that you know that it's not just about someone in your interview likes you or doesn't like you. It's a much more thorough process that requires a lot. So I kind of want you to be aware of that and what goes on in it. So today I'm going to talk about what makes for a very effective interview. And we're going to get into some interesting things today. I'm going to go into some of the pitfalls. I'm going to go into some of the tips that we offer. And, these are tips that are tried and true. Things that we talk about in the interview mastery course, as well as what we talk about in the mock interview. And then we're going to get into a few case studies that I thought would be kind of fun to dive into, some case studies of past clients that we've helped throughout the years. And these three candidates that we'll be talking about all got into the universities after working with us. And so I was reviewing their mock interviews today, and I was able to get some of that, and then I talked to them after their interview, after they got accepted, and we had a kind of a follow-up discussion, and they were able to let me know like what they were able to do right after we had the mock interview, and why they think they got in. And so I think it should be an interesting little bit, because we haven't done anything like this before. So it's kind of fun to see success stories, right, of people who maybe weren't so strong at the beginning, and then they improved their interview skills and they got in. So that's cool. So again, thanks for joining. Right now I'm going to turn this over to the slideshow. So I'll try not to make it, I know slideshows can sometimes be a little bland, but then again, you don't want to see me the whole time, do you? So let's do this. Let me just shift my screen a little bit here. And let's do this guy. There we go. All right. So here we are, the power of an effective interview. And so again, Kevin Marshall, I won't go into too much more about what I've done. I've said enough about myself. Let's get into some of the common pitfalls. Now, just a note, I'm going to talk for a few minutes here. I'm going to go through the slides, and then there's going to be some time at the end for questions. If you have a question, feel free to post it right now if you want, but or as I go through, I'll do my best to go back up and look at the top. There is a limit to how many messages I can see in the chat room, though. So if you really, if you find that you don't see your own message by the time questions come around, feel free to repost it. We'll go from there. So common pitfalls. Let's go through some of these. So candidates often go into these interviews, and depending on how much interviewing experience they've had, they're either going to really do great and knock them dead, or they're going to go in with some issues. And when we talk to folks and they come to us, most of the time it's after they've, people don't usually come and ask for to join the interview mastery course with us and do a mock interview until they've had a bad experience. Now, there are some candidates, which I will say right now, that have never had an interview, had never had an interview before, and they just knew that they were not going to be, awesome at this from the very get-go. So they were very strategic, and they planned it out and said, yeah, you know, I'm going to definitely sign up for the interview mastery course ahead of time. And that has been really cool to see, because it really improved their first time out of the gate, basically. But a lot of times people will come to us after they've made some mistakes. And here's some of the mistakes that I see a lot of. Number one, there's a focus on me instead of you. And I was just talking to someone today about this. This is a very common mistake that people make, and it's very easy to do. Even for me, it's easy to do. It's sort of built into our behavior as humans. We tend, as we're having conversations, we tend to focus on ourselves a lot. And we speak from the I perspective, the perspective of me, the perspective of what do I want? What can I benefit? How can I benefit? What can I gain from this experience? What can you do for me? Why should you give me a chance? And the pattern being that it's all about me, 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 me. And so what I want to bring out in this is to be very mindful of that. People come across and they'll be asked the question, why should we choose you as a candidate? And I've heard in many interviews the response, well, you should choose me because if you choose me, I'll be able to become a dentist. I'll be able to have a better life. I'll be able to support my family better. I'll be able to make my patients happy. You know, I'll be able to open a practice. Then I can go and I can get a secondary, you know, specialty or something like that, to do residency. It'll be really good for me, basically. And sometimes I'm surprised, but a little bit surprised when I hear these responses. But I always remember, okay, well, this is natural. But it's very important that you not fall into this trap, because really, what's going on here is that you're under the misconception that the schools and whoever is interviewing you actually cares about you. And this is a hard thing to hear. We all kind of want to believe that if someone's interviewing you, they must care about you. But the truth is, they really don't care any more about you than they do anybody else. And who do they care most about? If you were to ask them the question, who do they care most about? Well, guess who? They care about the same person you care about yourself. They care about themselves. We all care about ourselves. I care most about me, right? And when you kind of come to that realization that we all as humans tend to be most interested in ourselves, tend to be most interested in our story versus someone else's story, that's a really big realization. Then you can start to reverse things and use it to your advantage. Because now you know that the person interviewing cares mostly about themselves, right? If I know that information, what can I do? I can start to talk with a focus on them instead of a focus on me. So that instead of saying how by getting an acceptance to this program, I'm going to benefit, I can start to say, by getting acceptance to this program, you're going to benefit. And I won't say that directly, because that would sound corny and like I'm trying to trick them. But what I would imply is that I will be able to, you know, through my intelligence, through my ability to learn quickly, through my passion for helping patients, for my excellent bedside, through my excellent bedside manners, through my clinical experience, all these things demonstrate that I'm a candidate that cares about being a stellar contributor to your school, to your program. I'm going to raise the bar of your program. I'm going to come, get involved, see how I can help, whether it's a research program, whether it's a volunteer program. I'm going to get involved to help in any way I can, to help the program run smoother, to help professors, you know, to learn as quickly as I can, to make it easier on professors. I'm the candidate that is focused on making this school, you know, adding in contributing to the prestige of this program by being excellent and by matching the level of excellence that this program offers. So I'm going to want to start to talk in a way that kind of elevates me to a level of excellence so that I can contribute. And I'm going to use words like contribute, and I'm going to use words like provide, and I'm going to use words like consider, again, a patient's feelings and emotions, consider, what's best for the whole, what's best for the entire class, what's best for the school. I'm going to use words like gratitude, grateful for grateful to be here and to take advantage of this opportunity. I'm going to use privilege, words like privileged. So when I say the word privileged, I'm privileged. I would be privileged to be here. That's giving honor to the school. That's giving honor to you, not to me. I am so grateful to be in your presence. So these are the kind of you can see it if you kind of look carefully. There's a subtle shift now. So it's not so much about what I'm going to benefit from. It's about how I'm going to help and contribute to the community, to helping people, to helping the program, whatever I can do. Now, you don't want to act arrogant and say, well, I'm going to save you. I'm going to save this program. I'm going to save this school. You start to go into that territory, and now you're again in the bad, dark territory again. So you want to find a nice balance between, don't act arrogantly like you're here to save the world, but you also want to be respectful. So again, think about that as a philosophy, focusing on you instead of on me. Another mistake is that people are unenthusiastic. They just kind of come to the interview, a bit of drabness, and not showing a lot of life and excitement. And this is something that I realized was present in me when I started interviews, that I tend to just kind of talk at a monotone level, and I'm not really that excited in the way I'm speaking. I'm not showing a lot of passion. So I had to turn up the notch for me, because my regular level is pretty low of exuberance and expression when I talk. So I had to turn up that notch at least three or four knobs up, right, or 3 or 4 notches up, and become more excited and more enthusiastic, and start to use emotions as I spoke. And that really showed and demonstrated to the person listening that I was an alive person. I wasn't just a robot, that I had things to say. Another mistake, not researching the school, not researching well enough in many cases. And this usually comes up in questions that they'll ask you, such as, why did you choose our program, or why are you interested in coming to our program, or why are you interested in coming to our university? And people have nothing really specific to respond to. They just say, well, it's a great school, you have great professors. That's often all I'll hear sometimes in interviews. There's a certain amount of excellence and blah, blah, blah. But what they'll say is very generic things, generic responses that could be applied to almost any interview they were in. So if the answer to a question, why are you choosing our program, if you could take what you said and apply it to any school, or at least to 5 other schools, and it would work in that interview, you probably have a bad answer. You probably are not being specific enough. Because what excites an interviewer is when an interviewee, you, responds and says, I am choosing University of da-da-da because it has an excellent research project in, something, pathology of the blah, 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 right? Something very specific. Or it has a huge emphasis on community service, and the program, this particular program, and then you would say the program's name of the community service effort, has helped 3,000 homeless individuals get dental care that didn't have dental care before. Now I've said something extremely specific that shows that I researched that school. and now I'm impressing that interviewer. So that's a big mistake, is people don't do enough research. Another one, saying too little or saying too much. And there's a typo there. I should have said too, T-O-O. So saying too little or saying too much. This is often when you'll have a question, someone will ask you something, and then I've had candidates who, they give me 1 or 2 word answers, or they'll give me a very incomplete feeling answer, incomplete response. It doesn't feel like they gave me what I was looking for. And as the interviewer, I either have to kind of probe them and say, okay, well, I'm going to go further and ask, like, okay, what did you mean by that? Or can you tell me more? Or if I'm not interested in them, I'm just going to give up and just move on and mark them down for that, give them a bad score. So be careful if you feel like you're not saying enough or you're holding back. You want to say the right amount. But also don't overdo it. Don't, if they ask you to tell them where you went to dental school, you don't have to, like, if they ask you where did you go to dental school, you don't, and how was dental school, you don't have to tell them, like, every single year I did this, year 1 I did this, and here's the classes I took, year 2 I did this, here's the classes I took, and here's this professor that I had. I mean, don't overdo it. You don't want to waste your interview discussing things that are not big wins for you. You want to definitely focus your attention in a way so that you are packing the most punch for packing the most punch really for each question. So yeah, if they're asking you a question, do your best to find that balance between talking too little and talking too much. Another one is ignoring cues from interviewers. If you're talking and talking and talking about it and responding, and you notice that the interviewer is looking away or looking down at their watch, or they are kind of yawning, you need to pick up on those cues. At that point, you've lost their interest. They are probably thinking about what they need to pick up from the grocery store after work today. They're not thinking about you anymore. So do your best to bring them back. Either stop what you're saying or wrap up what you're saying, or say something that does bring their attention back to you. Finally, 2 mistakes. Either people are too much about just being themselves, or they are being someone who they're not. So what does it mean to make the mistake of just being yourself? Isn't that a good thing? It can be good in the sense of being authentic, being your true self. Yes, that's great. But some people misinterpret this to mean if I'm just myself, I'll just be completely honest and open about everything they ask, and so they'll often shoot themselves in the foot by saying things that are not that don't make them look very good. So an example of this might be, let's see, they might say something like, well, tell me about your dental school experience, and then you might say, well, it was a terrible experience. I had a terrible time. My professors were idiots. My dental school colleagues were idiots. It just sucked. The overall experience just sucked. Okay, well, yes, that was an honest response, and perhaps that's how you normally talk. Maybe you're just being yourself, right? Guess what? If that is who you really are, and that's your normal way of responding to stuff, you probably have shown them that you're not the right candidate for them. So there are times where you need to be your best self. That's kind of what I like to say. It's not to say that you shouldn't be yourself, but you should be your best version of yourself. So maybe you're 70% of the time you're kind of down about things, you'd like to complain a lot about stuff, maybe that's who you are, but maybe 20% of the time you're really positive and you're really upbeat, and you can show gratitude and appreciation for things. Well, if that's true, bring that 20% of your personality to the interview. Bring the 20% that's positive, excited, upbeat. Therefore, you're still being yourself, you're just being the best version of yourself, and that's the distinction I like to make. Also, you don't want to be someone that you're not at the same time. So don't try to become, somebody who you can't, this is like acting sometimes. If you can't pull off a role, and let's say you try to become a know-it-all in dentistry, but you don't know it all. Don't try to do that. Be yourself. Demonstrate what you know. Demonstrate what you are comfortable with, but don't pretend to be a know-it-all who has the answers to everything if that's not who you really are. And I've seen some candidates make that mistake before. Let's go to the next one. Next slide here. Okay. Not asking intelligent questions at the end, mostly at the end, I will say. Again, this goes back to the research thing. You need to be able to ask very intelligent questions at the end. If you ask questions that are mediocre or uninteresting, or they're very logistical, like when am I going to hear about my acceptance? When, would you send me an email, or will you send me a thing in the mail? Not a great question, not interesting questions. Ask really intelligent questions. Ask about the program. Ask about their philosophy as a school or as a program, or their philosophy about teaching. Ask about particular programs that they have going or projects that they have going, like research, community service, etc. Ask things that make you look intelligent. So that's a big one. And a lot of people will either not ask any questions, which is one of the biggest no-nos of interviewing. They'll actually show up to an interview and not ask any questions. Do you have any questions? No. Okay. Well, you basically just flunked the interview. I hate to say it. Or they'll ask unintelligent questions that are, yes or no questions. You might as well ask where the bathroom is, because that's about the level of those questions. So you want to ask intelligent questions because it shows that you're an intelligent candidate. Not practicing with a mock interview. I don't care if you join us for a mock interview. I don't care if you go, locally and look for someone to help you with interviewing. Whatever you decide to do a mock interview. I never show up to an opportunity these days that I care about without practicing an interview. And I've been interviewing for years. I would say I'm an above average, a highly above average interview. I've been on both sides of the table. I've been an interviewer and an interviewee. I've done tons and tons of interviews over the years. And I would never show up to an interview without practicing at least once with a friend, family member, or especially if I can, with a professional who knows that industry really well. So this is a big mistake people make. They just show up to interviews unpracticed, unrehearsed, everything. And it's, if you're an incredible candidate whose reputation precedes you and your qualifications are spectacular, maybe you can pull that off. Maybe it doesn't matter if you flunk your interview because you're such a great candidate. But if you're like the rest of us who actually has to work for that, you'd want to make sure that you're practicing. Not expressing ambition. This is a big one. A lot of people show up to the interview, and when they're asked, like, what's your 5 and 10-year goals? They're just like, well, just want to have a comfortable life. Don't want to work too hard. Focus on, having a good time with friends and family and stuff like that. That's not a very ambitious answer. And you're applying for a very competitive, very ambitious field where it's all about, your ability to demonstrate mastery and effectiveness and intelligence. All these things are very ambitious, and a lot of people expect to go on and achieve great things and change the industry. So if you're showing up without any ambition and just saying, well, I just want to have an easy life and get a lot of money, you are expressing someone who's not very ambitious and may not be aligned with the school, especially if you go to some of the more prestigious schools. This is going to be even more important for them, like a UCSF, like a University of Chicago, etc. We'll get into those. UCLA. Getting off topic, obviously this is pretty self-explanatory. Don't do it. Don't get off into different topics that are not related to the question they asked you. Remember what the question is and stick to that. And finally, getting defensive. Sometimes an interviewer and you will not, your personalities just don't mix very well. And there's a bit of, maybe you get rubbed the wrong way. Maybe they're kind of like a little confrontational with you, and maybe they question something that you said. And sometimes they'll try to get a rise out of you to see how you react. Don't get defensive. Don't argue with them. Don't fight with them. Don't defend yourself in a blatant way. Just calm down, take a deep breath, be polite, and be joyful in your response, and keep a positive kind of attitude going. And they won't be able to get to you, and it'll make you look so much more professional. And that's gonna be they're gonna end up appreciating you and respecting you after that. So that's why you do that. Let's go to the next couple. Now we're going to get into some crafting of the perfect responses. I'll go through these pretty quickly because I want to leave time for questions. As you can see, I really like this cat and dog dental picture. I had that in my last presentation, so you may keep seeing it. Anyway, crafting the perfect response. Outline and write out your responses beforehand. It's not hard to figure out what questions they're going to ask. You can find that on Student Doctor Network. You can find that on the internet. You can get a list of questions that are tailored towards either medical or dental school. You can find questions, go through, list them out, and then start to write out responses to especially to some of the big ones, like, tell me about yourself. Why did you become a dentist? Why do you want to come to the US? What's your interest in that? What's your story there? Tell me about your dental school. All these kind of questions. And we may actually dedicate an entire webinar to the various most popular questions at one point, and go through the different ways of responding. But either way, you can get those questions. They're not a mystery. And we talk about them even in the Interview Mastery course. We have kind of a list of some schools and which programs, what kind of questions they're notorious for asking. Some of the more interesting ones are from Colorado. They ask very unique questions there. But if you can figure them out, write them out, and then you need to practice those. And you need to come up with a response, come up with bullet points, and then practice and practice and practice rehearsing them. So you want to sound as natural as possible. You want to make, you don't want to sound like you remembered word for word what the response that you wrote down was. You want to make it sound like it's coming to you in the moment. And so you need to work on that, and that's about practice. Don't just tell. People often ask, like, well, what makes you a unique candidate? And they say, well, I'm nice. I'm really hardworking. I'm very smart. I'm dedicated, and I'm really able to work well with others. So that's my answer. Okay, but what did I just do? I just listed off a number of adjectives about myself, a number of characteristics about myself that anyone could say about themselves. I haven't given any proof of it. What's a way to give proof? Give examples. When you say I'm intelligent, or I'm really smart, or I'm a really fast learner, give an example about a time where you learned something quickly, especially with dentistry, and how quickly you were able to pick it up. If you say you work well with others, give an example of how you were able to work effectively with maybe an administrative assistant in the office or in the dental clinic that you work at, and everyone else doesn't get along with her, but you do, because you're able to really work well with people. Those are examples. That's proof. And so you need to give some demonstration about what you're talking about, not just give generic kind of adjectives about who you are. Prepare stories. And that's kind of along the line. When people may ask you, tell me about a time when. They may ask you to give examples about times that you were confronted challenges, times where you had to make a difficult decision, times where you were finding yourself, like in an ethical dilemma. And you need to be able to have stories available in your mind so that you're not stuttering and like drawing blank when they ask you these questions. One time I was in an interview and I had not prepared stories, and they asked me, I think the question was, what is the most difficult decision you ever had to make in your life? And I sat there, I had not prepared any story, I hadn't thought about anything, about any challenges I'd overcome or any years of transformation or experiences. I hadn't thought about anything. I just showed up to the interview. And I sat there drawing blank, and I was like, and I did that for about 20 seconds, and then I gave a really poor response. And if I had just thought about some stories ahead of time that could be applied to different scenarios, I would have been able to probably do really well in the interview, because after I basically had no answer for it, it kind of affected the rest of the interview. Practice, practice, practice. Do a video chat with yourself. I do recommend most people have webcams, so you can basically record yourself responding to questions, and then you can watch yourself afterwards. And also, when we do a mock interview, if you sign up for the Interview Mastery course, and we do a mock interview with you, we will record that and send that to yourself, so you can also see. Because when you see yourself, it makes a big difference. Finally, prepare for glitches. Be prepared to explain. I mean, things are going to come up. They're going to ask you details about things that you weren't expecting. They're going to look at your maybe your CV, and they're going to say, what happened here? What you weren't working for a year and a half. What's going on there? And then you need to be able to explain what happened. You need to be able to discuss a low GPA maybe, or a low test score, and be able to explain these things. So you need to have responses for all the stuff. And there's different ways of approaching that, of course, and we kind of go into that in the mock interview. We can help you strategize some of those, because everyone's case is different. But definitely think about how you want to respond to some of the weak parts of your application. All right, and now I want to kind of go over some case studies real quick if we have time. I think we have a few minutes. I'm not using people's names, but these are all clients that we worked with, and I'm happy to say that we've all spoken to them and had a follow-up session with them, and we're able to discuss with them like what went well for them, and what were they able to improve upon, because they came to us after not getting in. They had interviewed usually at more than one school before they came to us, and then we worked with them with the Interview Mastery course, and we were able to coach and chat with them about how they can improve things. So again, I'm using not using their real names here, but let's go through them. Johnny, who got into the University of Pennsylvania, really happy about this, because he had come to us before, and we had a number of interviews with him, mock interviews with him. And he really, really, I mean, one of my favorite, he's definitely one of my favorite clients that we ever worked with. He had really fantastic attitude and personality, and was just really dedicated, very respectful of, I feel like he was very respectful of his interviewers. And so he, when we had the interview with him, he was having some struggle kind of articulating, his great points about him, and like what made him a great candidate. And we were able to kind of shift that, I think, a little bit, and he was able to take that to the interview. So things that he did right after working with him, he improved himself where he was able to give a really solid response to the question of, tell me about yourself. It was comprehensive, it was interesting, and it was compelling. And this is really important, because this is one of the most important questions of your interview, is tell me about yourself. It kind of sets the tone for the rest of it. And so he practiced and practiced that question. And by the end of working together, he really had come up with a great discussion, quickly kind of like a breakdown of who he was and why he was a great candidate. And so I was really happy to see that. He also answered every question completely, but he wasn't too verbose. He didn't overdo it and talk too long. He gave the right amount of information, but he didn't give everything away. He kind of let the interviewer want to follow up and ask some follow-up questions, which is great. And so I noticed that when I was reviewing his video today, is that he satisfied the interviewer's question, but as the interviewer, you felt like you wanted to know more. He kind of left you a little, kind of wanting a little more. So that was fantastic. Fantastic strategy there. He was well composed, displayed confidence, highly respectful in his responses to his interviewers. And that's important. Just like, you just gave this impression of like focusing on them, giving them his full attention, and as well as displaying a lot of confidence. That's a big one. And you know, we've talked about confidence in the past. Huge important part, and we even talk about that in the interview mastery course. We actually have a whole section on the importance of confidence, and you really have to display confidence, not arrogance, but confidence. And he did that really well in a way that wasn't arrogant. And then finally, he expressed a strong interest and passion for dentistry and made a really good case for why he'd be a good dentist and why he would be able to take his skills from his home country in dentistry and apply them here, but also improve upon them by going back to school. So that was fantastic. Case number 2, Grace, who got into the University of Pacific. She had been through 3 interviews before working with us. And so she improved a lot. At the beginning, she was a little quick with her rate of speech. She was talking a little too quickly. I know that some of you may struggle with this, especially if English is not your first language, but but at the same time, you also you're quite fluent at English. And so we noticed her speech was really quick and we couldn't always understand her. So we worked with her to kind of slow that down a little bit, and she was able to do that. And we were able to see the difference, and it became the right speed. Came across genuine and authentic instead of robotic, which I think was great. And she practiced acting natural. She practiced her responses so well that by the time she was done practicing, her responses felt very much like in the moment, which is great. She also had a good mix of personal and professional responses. Especially when she was talking about, tell me about yourself, she put a little bit of her personal struggles that she had been through, but didn't overdo it on the personal side, and also talked about her professional struggles and her professional accomplishments, which was fantastic. Also, at the beginning, she was very gesticulative. I mean, she was using her hands a lot, and so much to the point that they were a little distracting. And by the end of that, she was able to reduce that a bit and make it so that the hands were helpful in demonstrating what she wanted to talk about, but they weren't overly distracting, which is great. I'm going to turn it back to myself. Hold on. Okay, let's go to the last one. University of Pittsburgh. Lisa got into the University of Pittsburgh. Happy about that. And she mastered the art of bringing out her humorous personality, I felt. Which she had a natural humorous personality. And at the beginning, she wasn't sure if it was okay or safe to bring that out. But we were able to talk her into doing that, and kind of convinced her that humor can really be a powerful strategy in an interview. It helps lighten the load. It helps kind of loosen up everyone so that people feel a little more connected. And so she was able to connect with her interviewers a little more effectively when she was able to bring in her humor. And she's a very funny person anyway. But at the beginning, she didn't come across very funny. And after working with her, she was able to bring a little bit more of that in there. Now, notice that not too much. She didn't, as I say down here below, she made light jokes, but she didn't get into any danger zones. She didn't make any inappropriate jokes. She didn't make fun of other people. She didn't make fun of the interviewers. She might make a little joke about herself, but it wasn't a deprecating joke that basically showed that she wasn't confident about herself. She made the right kind of jokes that were safe, basically, but still very funny. She came across very sincere. She expressed emotions, and those emotions that she expressed during the interview matched the emotions that were expressed in her SOP, which is important. So there was a alignment between the two. She was positive and upbeat. showed excitement and opportunity for the opportunity, and also a lot of gratitude, sort of an attitude of gratitude about being there and thankful to be a part of the opportunity. And so overall, her energy in the interview was very positive and felt kind of warm to the interviewers, which is great. And then her reason that she discussed for going into dentistry was solid and purposeful. It was someone who demonstrated that they make their decisions. She made her own decisions about stuff. She didn't just let life kind of push her into this, or her family kind of talk her into things. She really showed that she was the one who decided her future. So came to the close of these workshops, or of these slides. If you love our workshops, I'm going to talk about real quick the All Access Pass. What we've done is we've taken a compilation of all of our years of workshops that we've done, and we've done a ton of them about interviewing, about the bench test, different tips, various aspects of everything, also about editing and applications. And we've put them on our site, and they're available at the link there, internationaldentistcentral.com/workshops. And you can go, and if those of you are interested and you want to kind of see what we've done in the past, you want to kind of review and spend some time soaking all this knowledge in, feel free to go do that. I think it's about $25 a month. $29 a month. And it's a great deal, I think, for those of you who really feel like, you're appreciating the information that we give, but you kind of want more and you want access to those things. And there's also an opportunity to just sign up for all of them at once and then have access forever. So feel free to check that out, and we'll try to send you guys a link for that later on. I want to take some questions right now. And so what I'm going to do is put it back on myself. Put this back on myself. Let's see if I can do this. Here we go. Here I am. All right, cool. And I'm just going to look through the chat box. Now, I will say that the chat box doesn't show me much history. So let's see if I can see more history. No, not too much. Let me make sure that I'm looking at the right screen, though, just to be safe. Okay, so if you have any questions, feel free to put your question below. And I'm going to refresh this page so that I can make sure that I'm not missing any questions right now. All right, cool. I have some more questions, so that worked. My browser's not playing nice with me. Okay, so I have someone who said, Amina, and I recently got accepted. That's fantastic at UPenn. That's wonderful. So congratulations, by the way. Mega from Boston. I don't have many friends in school. How do I do research? Okay, don't have many friends who are in school who would give me school specifics. How do I do a research of the school? University websites all look the same to me. It's a really good question. This is from the right point left. And so what I would say to that is, yes, this is absolutely true. School websites suck. They're not very informative. Often the reason, and I used to work in, like I said, I used to work for a university, and we were guilty of this too. We don't put a lot of information or helpful information, in our on our websites. Maybe the basics, but in terms of actually getting into like the nitty gritty, that stuff you have to do under the surface. What I would say is, Google's always going to be your friend with everything, right? So what you need to do is start getting good at searches that are specific to the school and finding out whatever you can about the school that's outside of the school's website. You'll probably find more information on other websites about the school or the program specifically than you will on their, School of Dentistry website, actually. So what you'll find is that maybe you'll see that there was an award in the community given to the School of Dentistry. Maybe you'll find that, you'll find some article in like a local newspaper. Maybe if let's say we're talking about University of Chicago, you might find an article in the Chicago Tribune about University of Dentistry. And I might even do a search, university. I might do a search for Chicago Tribune, University of Chicago Dentistry, or School of Dentistry, and see just what shows up. I might find some articles about professors that made the news, about programs that made the news, research that's going on there. And then I might even remove the Chicago Tribune and just do a search in like Google News. And Google News is also a great resource that is specific to journalism and news sources. And so you'll be able to find a lot of stuff in there, hopefully about the program. And then you can talk about that and be like, well, I read in the news that there's a headline that some of the research that you're doing here has made a huge milestone, and it's fantastic, and and Professor so and so was mentioned in that, and I'd love I'd love the opportunity to talk to him one day or to discuss more. So you can really get into some more specifics about that by doing more deep research. And so there's an art to internet research, of course, but those who stop at the website, they're only going to get that very top layer of stuff. So you want to dig deeper, find out whatever you can. Even Facebook groups, use the Facebook search and see what you can find on there. Really get in there, and if you can find people who are in the program through Facebook groups, who are in the University of Dental School, I would try befriending them, and I would see if they would talk to me a little bit and just say, hey, how do you like the program? Anything you can tell me that makes it unique, etc. And then you can chat about that. So that's a really great question, though. Can you give me an example of a question that Colorado asked that's weird? Like I mentioned that they asked some weird questions. I would say a weird question, there's a lot of them actually. One might be a lot of ethical questions. So they might put you in a situation where, what is one? You've been asked, well, let's see, there was one that was very interesting recently. Sort of about cheating, I think, and it was sort of what if your best friend cheated, and you saw it? Another one that was interesting, okay, I remember one now, was what would you do if your roommate asked you to, your roommate had decided, and she's in the program too, she hadn't studied for an exam, but you decided to study the day before the exam, and then at the last minute, she decides to go party and have a fun night, not deciding to study. And then she comes home at midnight and you're still studying, and then she says to you, hey, can you catch me up on the exam? Can you fill me in so that I do well tomorrow? What would you do in that situation? So stuff to think about like that. They might ask very direct questions like, what would you do if a patient asked you to change the date on their form for insurance reasons? So again, some pretty tough questions, and I'll leave it to you to think about how you'd answer these, because these are tricky. But you definitely want to stay on the side of doing the right thing no matter what. So think about that stuff. I'm going to see if there's any more questions that have come in, because we're kind of reaching the end of our chat tonight. On the side of doing the right thing no matter what. Excuse me if you hear the audio in the background. Getting some more stuff, and I'll go through some of these. How far is the interview important? What do they look for in an interview? How far does the interview can overcome any negative points in the application? I think the Izzo, you were asking basically in general, like how important is the interview really? And how far does it help you? That's a really good question. I mean, obviously every candidate is looked at from a very holistic perspective. They look at your GPA and they look at your test scores. TOEFL, for instance, they make sure you passed your MBD Part 1 and 2. They look at your experience in your home country. How long were you a practicing dentist, for instance? Any specialties that you have. They look at all this stuff, right? Then they start to look at your applications. how, are they well put together? Are they organized? Are they kind of messy? Are they all over the place? Are they strategic in what they're saying? If you passed all of that and you have an interview, now, most likely you've passed a certain criteria to get there. And now it's really about performance. Can you, for many schools, can you pass the bench test and succeed and excel on that? And also, are you a right fit? Even if, we've talked to some students who've done really well on the bench test, but their interview, they did not well. And they just felt they came across the wrong way during the interview, and the school just felt they weren't a good fit. So, in the US, there's a huge emphasis, there's a bigger emphasis than in many other countries on interviewing, on statement of purpose. And a lot of times they're looking for a candidate who's going to complement their program, and that's where they kind of discover, it's through the interview that they often discover whether you're a good complement for their program or not. So unfortunately, it leaves a lot of international dentists in a situation where they're not used to this process, because maybe in their home country interviews weren't either a part of the process or they weren't a big deal for getting acceptance to a school. So they don't think of it as a big deal, but often in the US it's a very big deal, and it makes a big difference. Now, I won't say it's the biggest thing, because there's no one biggest thing. If anything is the biggest, it might be the bench test, but it's definitely up there. It's definitely up there. So don't underestimate it. Someone asked, do we need a US-based internship or shadowing? It does help, especially if you haven't had a lot of experience in your home country as an associate dentist. It definitely helps. And the more experience and exposure you have to a US dental industry or dental office, dental clinic, that goes a long way, or that can go a long way. Let's see. What's the difference in interviews of schools with bench tests and schools without bench tests? Do schools with bench tests focus more on clinical work and whether you have basically better hand skills, I'm assuming? Another good question. Yeah, if you have a school, like I said before, school like UCLA or UCSF, both of them have a bench test and an interview. They're going to evaluate your bench test. That's going to be a huge part of it. And then they're going to look to the interview to see, did we like this person? Is this person going to fit in our culture? Are they, especially for a high profile, prestigious school, they want really hardworking, really ambitious people. Also, they're going to try to find holes in you, They might say, okay, well, this person did really well on their bench tests. They practiced and studied for that. That's great. But I also see from their, from their application that they're not great academically. I see that they have a lot of stress in their lives. Maybe they're trying to find anything they can. Maybe in your interview you kind of give away that you're a very stressed out person and you don't handle a lot of things well. You may have done well in the bench test, but that doesn't necessarily mean, just doing well on a bench test. They know, and we all know, that it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be a great student, does it? It's just one metric. And it's an important metric, but it's not the only one. So be mindful of that. And honestly, the other thing is, if they don't like you as a person and you rub them the wrong way, they see you as arrogant, they see you as dumb, or not intelligent, they see you as annoying, they're going to have to work with you or teach you or be involved, with you in a clinic for 2 years at least. They're going to ask themselves, do I really want to be with this person? Do I want to spend my working day with this person all day? And if they find you someone they don't want to be around, you could be the one that they cross off the list, and hopefully that's not you. But nonetheless, interviews are the time to show them that you're a person that they like and they want to be with. I'm going to answer one last question. This is from Lillian. How do you explain a long time until applying to school in the USA in the case of like a medical issue in the family? Basically, you're kind of saying that you had some personal difficulties. Your mother, husband and mother had an illness. How to explain a personal problem without being completely open? Yeah, it's a really good question. You know, you have to kind of mentally prepare yourself for this, and the hope is that you're at a point with the process personally where you emotionally you kind of where you stand a little bit. So if it would be really hard if you're in the middle of everything, but if it's been a little time and you can kind of reflect on stuff, then that's a good time if you can. Not always easy, but to talk about what you kind of lessons you've learned. You may, if you can talk about lessons you've learned through the experience, you may be able to discuss like, oh, this is what happened to us, and this is what I've learned. Maybe a lesson about how important healthcare is, and how that's inspired you to want to become a better healthcare professional. Maybe it's inspired you to treat patients differently than you used to before, because you know what it's like to be a patient or to be a family member of a patient, and you were in that doctor's office. So there's a lot of things you can do. You can basically tell a story that's vulnerable and shows that you've been through a lot, but if you can do it in a way that shows that you overcame or you're overcoming and you're getting through things, and you're someone who has a positive outlook, if no matter what, and you still have a lot of passion about completing and getting accepted and completing the process of an advanced study program, I think that the balance of that difficult experience you have gone through mixed with a lot of self-reflection and a kind of a positive spin on things as well as you can make a big difference and show them that you're a very mature, empowered sort of human being, but someone who's also gone through challenges and overcome them, or is overcoming them, or is in the process of meeting those challenges. So I definitely resonate. I mean, it's all this stuff is tough. Life can be tough, and so I really appreciate you opening up about that and discussing that honestly. And I think that obviously you don't want to be phony about it and say, oh, this is a great experience for me. It's okay to be honest and say, no, this was not a great experience. This was tough, but here's what I learned. Here's how I've grown, and if you can do that, it probably puts you in a really powered position when you're talking about that stuff. So anyway, it's 9:10, where I'm actually, it's 10 over the hour. I apologize. I'm not sure what time it is for you, but I really appreciate everyone's time tonight. Thank you for bearing with me through this. We've covered a lot tonight, and I really appreciate the thoughtful questions. Really appreciate you coming out, and it says a lot to me that you are dedicating this time for yourself. So definitely check out, check out the workshop thing we have going on at internationaldentistcentral.com/workshops if you're interested in seeing any of the past things we've done. But keep a lookout. We'll be continuing to do this workshop series at least for a good while, and we'll have a different topic each week. So next week should be a topic with Dr. Alyssa, and then again we're going to try to have Sarah Vince, who's our interview coach, on in the next while, in the next couple webinars. So we'll be announcing that. Thanks again for coming out. Have a great night, and do awesome with your application preparation. Take care.